Before we begin, I want to give my dear friend and creative collaborator, Lanier Burton, a very happy, although belated, birthday. He is a Libra and one of my nearest and dearest, so please go check out his comic book series, True Science Fiction, over on Webtoons. This show may contain adult language and themes. Listener discretion is advised. With that out of the way, let's start the show. You're listening to the Murder is My Sign podcast, the podcast where we talk true crime and astrology. I'm your host, Jordy Death, here to let your way through the true crime astrology storm. Here we are, folks, the last zodiac sign of season 1, the lovely yet lethal Libras. Now, of course, the zodiac starts with the sign of Aries in March, but when I first started Murder is My Sign back in November of 2018, it was Scorpio season, and that is where we began our journey down this dark and curvy serial killer road. I'm so freaking excited to be here, though. Almost a year later, the podcast has slowly grown and evolved over the course of the year, and it's been a project of mine that I have been very passionate and proud of. So thank you, sincerely. Thank you to all who have taken the time to listen to Murder is My Sign. And thank you to those who have helped support the show financially. It is truly amazing to receive such support from such a wonderful community of friends, freaks, and family. You may have noticed an ad play earlier in the beginning of the show. Well, if you've been following me on social media or on Patreon, you will know that Murder is My Sign has officially moved hosting sites and is now hosted on Sprecher, where I can now incorporate ads into my show and actually make some revenue off of this creative endeavor of mine, which is so exciting. I know ads are annoying, but here's the thing, folks. Every time you listen to Murder is My Sign and you hear an ad or you interact with one, that will help support me and the show financially. And let me just say, times have been a little tough, and any little bit of help helps. Also, like joining my Patreon and subscribing to my Twitch channel, #Hustler. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about Libra, the scales, the season of balance, the fall, the beauty, and also just how lethal they can be. The serial killer I have chosen to focus on is Bobby Joe Long, a real sicko. As always, we're going to start off with the basics of the sign of Libra. Libra is a mutable air sign and runs from September 23rd through October 22nd. Not gonna lie, but Libra season is my absolute favorite because I freaking love fall. Scorpio is great too, mainly because of Halloween and Thanksgiving, but Scorpios can be pretty intense. Libra is ruled by the planet Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, just like the earth sign Taurus. So Libras love beauty and the finer things that life has to offer. As opposed to their planet-sharing partners, Taurus, Libras are very sociable people who are often very artistic, easygoing, and peaceable. The tarot card associated with Libra is Justice, which represents a karmatic rebalancing process. So what has been out of harmony within your consciousness will be brought into proper relationship with God's love. Also, the Justice Tarot card, along with Lady Justice, holds a scale, and the Libra symbol is the scales. So what's interesting about the 7th sign of the zodiac is that it is the only one not represented by a human or animal, but instead of an object. Since Libra is symbolized by the scales, it will come to no surprise then that the legend behind the sign also deals with balance and justice. Much like the sign of Virgo, Libra is associated with the harvest, and in ancient times, grains and crops were weighed on the scales after they were harvested. The more profound symbolism behind the scales was that they weighed the souls of the dead and passed judgment. In Egyptian religion, ancient Egypt, the scales were associated with the god Anubis, conductor of souls. Anubis, who had the head of a jackal, was the Egyptian god of the dead and guided the dead throughout the underworld and made sure that they were weighed fairly, just like on The Biggest Loser or whatever. So in this regard, the dead heart, or soul as it were, had to be in harmony with truth before it could pass into the afterlife, and often truth was depicted as a feather. So I'm not sure how fair that weight was actually done, but that's what they believed in ancient Egypt. If your heart was heavier than the feather, then I don't think you got it to the afterlife. I don't know. I don't think you got the gold car access into the VIP lounge, so I don't know. But in Greek mythology, justice was represented by the goddess Themis, mother of Astrea. Remember the sign of Virgo? We talked about her last month. Themis and Astrea are the constellations of Libra and Virgo, who shine side by side. Legend has it that when the human race finally gets its shit together and reaches the golden age, Themis, who symbolizes justice, and Astrea, who symbolizes innocence, will return to Earth. And do what? I don't know. Probably shop at Target, drink White Claw, and be basic AF. Wait, no, that's me. Sorry. So the irony that faces Libras is that they are the sign of marriage and partnership. They are the happiest when functioning within a union and often lose their equilibrium and positive outlook when they are forced to be alone. What makes this ironic is that they pose a danger to themselves and their relationships by stirring up ill feelings from others in situations having to do with love. Because they are indecisive, they can both anger and disappoint their lovers and also have a tendency to be fickle and faithless. Perhaps it's because they are narcissists at heart, that they expect admiration. They crave being the center of any setting. Which, when you pair a Leo with a Libra, I would just love to see that production of who would outshine or outshow the other, since they are both attention whores. Granted, with Libras being an air sign, they're a bit more charming, intelligent, and elegant as opposed to Leo's fiery, aggressive, and boisterous style. Because Libras love balance, they can often have a very difficult time making a decision because they do not want to ever feel limited in their options. Thus, they can often fall into being lazy, self-indulgent, and the more they refuse to step out of their comfort zone and take a risk, the more they postpone making decisions. They have a deep-seated fear of being abandoned and alone, and thus often rely on the approval of others for their sense of self-worth, which in the end just never really works out for the best. Let's start talking about Bobby Joe Long, though, shall we? But first, a quick commercial break. The sources used for Bobby Joe Long's quote-unquote biography are the 101 People You Won't Meet in Heaven by Michael Powell, Serial Killers, A Shocking History by Igloo Books, and Wikipedia, because, internet. Our story begins in West Virginia in 1953. Can you hear the banjos playing? Now, all the sources that I have on Bobby Joe Long don't go into a whole lot of detail about his childhood or adolescence. They basically give the broad strokes and cut straight to the kills. So that's more or less what we'll be doing here in this episode. So Robert Joseph Long, born October 14th, 1953 in Canova, West Virginia, to Mr. Joe and Louetta Long, was called Bobby Joe in true West Virginia fashion, and was raised by a very dominating mother. Gee, I wonder if Louetta got any parenting tips from Augusta Gein. The home was broken, though, and Daddy Joe soon left, and Mama Louetta was constantly on the move, seeking new jobs and new partners. It was written in the 101 People You Won't Meet in Heaven book that Bobby Joe slept in his mother's bed until he was 13, and had suffered a series of head injuries as a child. The earliest was when he was 5 years old and fell from a swing and was knocked unconscious. A year later, he crashed his bike and had a severe concussion. And at age 7, he fell off a horse and complained of dizziness and nausea for several days after the incident. Folks, you're really only given 3 concussions in your life before shit gets real batty with your brain, which is probably why the suicide rate in the NFL players is strikingly high, and why a lot of them end up killing themselves by shooting themselves in the chest and then donating their brain to science so that way they can, do research on that. Anyhow, a little off topic, but moving on. When Bobby Joe was 11, puberty struck pretty hard, and it was discovered that he was born with an extra X chromosome, which, for those of you out there who may have skipped out on taking biology, X is the female chromosome, so poor Bobby Joe started growing breasts. And as he went through puberty, this diagnosis was called Klinefelter's syndrome. And this is a fairly rare disorder, and I can only imagine the absolute nightmare of being diagnosed with this and having to grow up in the 60s and 70s growing breasts as a boy. He did go through surgery to remove the extra tissue from his chest, but he was still scarred from the experience. For as traumatizing as this was, though, Bobby Joe still managed to have a quote-unquote fairly normal life, at least as far as I was able to read. Again, not a whole lot is out there. I mean, it could be as normal as it can be when you sleep in the same bed as your mama when you're 13, and you have to put up with her constant stream of new boyfriends and jobs. So, I know, normal is relative, right? When he was 19, he enlisted in the army and 6 months later, ended up marrying his high school sweetheart in 1974. At age 20, Bobby Joe got into a motorcycle accident that resulted in him fracturing his skull and placed him in a coma for weeks. When he eventually awoke, his personality had seemingly shifted. Any little annoyance would set him off into a fit of rage and violence. This was also when his uncontrollable sexual urges began. He demanded sex from his wife at least twice a day and was a chronic masturbator. Because of this, his wife left him in 1980 with the 2 kids and filed for divorce. According to the book Serial Killers, A Shocking History, Bobby Joe was an X-ray technician and was fired from several jobs for showing young girls pornographic pictures, ordering women to undress unnecessarily, and for propositioning female patients. Between the 3 sources I'm using, the timeline of when he began raping women seems to differ. The Serial Killers book says he began in 1976, but Wikipedia and 101 People You Won't Meet in Heaven says 1980 or 1981. I suppose the timeline isn't all that critical, so just know that it was in the early 80s when he began his raping spree. Bobby Joe was living in Florida and had started to use the classified ads to pick his victims around Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Ocala areas. Is it Ocala or Ocala? I don't know. I've never really been to Florida, so, I don't really give a fuck. You'd call up the ads that were selling small appliances and make daytime appointments to stop on by, making sure the wife was home alone. Housewives still being a thing during these days. And once he was inside the house, he'd ask to use the restroom, which is when he would pull out his rape kit, which included knife and some rope or other materials to tie the woman up. He would then exit the bathroom and attack the woman, holding her at knife point and tying her up before raping her. In 1983, Bobby Joe moved to Tampa, and this is when his raping took on a lethal edge. Bobby Joe would pick up prostitutes and hitchhikers and force them to strip down naked and lay down in the front seat of his car, where he would then tie their hands behind their back and rape them. He would then drive to a different location, sodomize them, and then proceed to kill them either by stabbing, strangling, or beating them to death, or a combination of all 3. In May of 1984, Bobby Joe's first victim was found. A naked woman had been found dead in Hillsborough County. This prompted an investigation into the abduction, rape, and murder of at least 10 women in the 3-county Tampa Bay area. The bodies of the women were often discovered positioned in crude postures. In 8 months, Bobby Joe had raped and murdered at least 9 women. In November of 1984, Bobby Joe had seemingly had enough of the raping and murdering and decided that it was time to get caught. He ended up letting his last victim, 17-year-old Lisa McVeigh, go, having only raped her repeatedly. Bobby Joe later said in an interview, "I knew when I let her go, it would only be a matter of time. I just don't care anymore. I wanted to stop. I was sick inside." It's kind of like Ed Kemper, like how after Ed Kemper killed his mom and his mom's friend, he drove around and then finally called in to the police in Colorado and kind of turned himself in. It's not totally unusual for killers wanting to be caught. So on November 16th, 1984, Bobby Joe Long was arrested outside of a movie theater and charged with sexual battery and the kidnapping of Lisa McVeigh. Bobby Joe signed a formal Miranda waiver, the whole, you have the right to remain silent, anything you say can and will be used against you in the court, blah, blah, blah. But Bobby Joe consented to questioning, and investigators began a lengthy session of questioning about a series of rapes and murders in the Tampa Bay area, where several jurisdictions had collected quite a bit of forensic evidence, such as semen, carpet fibers, and rope and ligature marks. The FBI was able to link the fibers found on most of the victims to Bobby Joe's car. So the state attorney's office of Hillsborough County confronted Bobby Joe with the evidence and were able to reach a plea bargain for 8 of the murders, as well as the kidnapping and rape of Lisa McVeigh. Bobby Joe Long pled guilty to all the crimes on September 24th, 1985, and received 26 life sentences without the possibility of parole, and 7 life sentences with the possibility of parole after 25 years. In addition, the state of Florida held the right to seek the death penalty for the murder of Michelle Sims, who Long had murdered on May 27, 1984. The penalty phase of the Sims trial was held in Tampa, Florida, and had only lasted 1 week, garnering a lot of media attention. Bobby Joe Long was found guilty and sentenced to die in Florida's electric chair. And just this past spring, on April 23rd, 2019, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed Bobby Joe Long's death warrant, and exactly 1 month later to the day, on May 23rd, Bobby Joe Long was executed by lethal injection and pronounced dead at 6:55 p.m. His final meal consisted of roast beef, bacon, French fries, and a soda. He gave no last statement. Rest in hell, Bobby Joe, you rotten bastard. Alright, let's get down to his birth chart. So what strikes me right away as being interesting in regards to Bobby Joe Long's birth chart as compared to the other killers we have covered this season is that he doesn't have any planets in retrograde. Imagine that. Born on October 14th, 1953 in Canova, West Virginia, Bobby Joe's sun is in the sign of Libra, which, as we discussed earlier, tends to find balance and harmony in all things. Although it is rare, you can find a hot-headed Libra among the crowd, which I think Bobby Joe was a rarity, but let us keep in mind that he did suffer from a lot of brain trauma from his childhood and formative years from the various concussions he sustained. Bobby Joe's moon was in the sign of Capricorn, which, if the moon deals with the emotions, instincts, and roots, Capricorn can be a very difficult position for the moon because Capricorns are very stoic and restrictive on the emotional front. People with this moon sign are very eager to learn, but are not interested in vague theories. They want to put their knowledge to use. Their shyness may be accompanied by resentment that others ignore them, and they may feel useless or unloved. It is important for people who have this moon sign to not seek approval from the outside because it is harmful and will not erase their inner doubts. They need to learn to trust their inner values and may have an ability to survive difficult periods from having to cope with a difficult childhood. And, Bobby Joe's childhood wasn't exactly cotton candy flavored. It was concussion filled and fucked up thanks to Mommy Dearest. So when we consult the birthday encyclopedia, October 14th is the birthday of the middle path. The greatest challenge for those born on this day is putting yourself on the line. The way forward is to understand that if you don't ever take a risk in your life, you can deprive yourself of opportunities for psychological growth. Their birthday power thought is, I'm excited about my future and the next step in my self-development. Which I wonder if Bobby Joe was actually excited about his future. He was in the army, but he didn't, again, from all the resources I found, they didn't really say that he was aspiring to be anything. He was an x-ray technician, so he must have, gone to some schooling, but who's to know and who's to say? Friends and colleagues of those born on this day trust them to pull them back to reality or be the voice of reason because they usually always find the middle way of doing things. They are very balanced. Again, scales, balanced, Libra, it all goes hand in hand, right? However, this being their greatest strength can also become their greatest weakness when taken to extremes, because too much common sense and moderation can cause them to become imbalanced, with the result of them either never taking any risks or succumbing completely to self-indulgent behavior. Either way, the results are disastrous to their psychological growth and well-being. On the dark side, they can be excessive, overly cautious, and passive, but at their best, they are temperate, composed, and reliable. Who knows what would have happened to Bobby Joe if he had not suffered those concussions and various head traumas growing up? Given what we have covered here over the last year, he probably still would have been pretty fucked up, and given the fact that his mother seemed to be in league with a lot of the other domineering mothers of past serial killers we've covered. Perhaps he would have just been a serial rapist instead of a serial killer. Who's to say, though? Regardless, he was a bad man and was executed for his crimes against women and humanity. And I can't believe that this is the end of season 1. I mean, this is drawing to the end. I just did a 4-part series on Ed Gein, and here we are with Bobby Joe Long, and this is not even half an hour. But again, my sources on this aren't as vast as they were on like Dahmer and Gein and some of the other killers. So I just want to thank you guys, and thank you everyone who takes the time to really listen and share this podcast, and for just being a part of this journey. It has been a very interesting ride this last year. Please stay tuned for some side slice episodes that will be coming out next month. I plan on doing a season recap of season 1, about everyone that we've covered. But first, I want to take some personal time, go to some concerts, get some tattoos, just live my best life before I get back into that. Season 2 of Murder is My Sign, Killer Couples and Deadly Duos will be launching in January. And this will give me plenty of time to get some research done, as well as some much needed time off to focus on my other projects. I plan on creating some patron-only content, such as blooper reels, behind-the-scenes videos, and other special content. So if you're interested and would like to see that, I would love to have you buy your plot in the boneyard, and head over to patreon.com/murderismysign to do that. You can stay up to date on Murder is My Sign, as well as my very lackluster life, by following me on social media. You can follow me on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, and YouTube, all at Jordy Death. That's JORDY Death. Or email the show directly, murderismysignpodcast@gmail.com. Have a wonderful, spooky season, everyone, and keep it creepy. And until next time, rest in peace.